For when people come up and they go, Etsy is not a handmade platform, it's like, I know. Don't let the squirrels in here fool you. I do pay attention. But you can see the confusion when one of the main categories to sell in is literally called handmade. Do you get my point? Hello everyone and welcome to episode 11 of Coffee and Craft Chat. I forgot what it was. If you are new here, these are waffly videos, they go on for some time. I show you my makes and whips for the previous month and we talk newsy stuff around the topic of handmade business, a bit of Etsy, a bit of my own business, and then we usually jump into a deeper dive topic on various things. It's a more ramblier video and I enjoy making them. So we're going to start with, I'm going to get my coffee because, well, it's called the Coffee and Craft Chat, isn't it? So with the power of editing, I will have my coffee in 3, 2, 1. Ta-da! Right, because it is the Coffee and Craft Chat, I need to show you my craft. So, excuse the mess in my house. Yeah, it's starting to look like a cardigan, isn't it? This is pretty much my only whip. There are no makes, there are no finished anything. There hasn't been for months. I've just been working on this when I'm not working on work. And it is my granny square cardigan, and that is what it looks like from the front currently. And this is what it looks like from the back. Isn't she beautiful? It's taken me an absolute age. Yes, I still have ends that I need to sew in, and no, I have not blocked it. Don't start. But I am insanely happy with that. And the fact that it looks like a cardigan now, or I can drape it over my dress form and at least imagine it as a cardigan, it just means that I feel more inclined to work on it. I have found though, if you look around the house, we've got a fairly light, ignore the socks, fairly light neutral tone going around the house, which is pretty helpful when you have a dog that molts to high heaven. I mean, the good thing about my carpet, it's the same colour as Charlie's fur and Luna's fur, so you don't actually see too much of the mess. But this shows it all up. Look it. Look it. Look it. Oh. This is why there's a no pets rule in the studio. Speaking of which, let's go in there, shall we? Anyway, so there is my whip for October. It's the same one that has been going on for months and months and months. Right. In we come to the chaos that is the studio. My studio is essentially this weird little room that wasn't even on the listing when we bought this house. And when we came to view it, we were like, oh, we didn't see any pictures of this. That's because it's a weird shape. You can't really do much with it. It's very narrow, but long-ish. It makes figuring out where to put stuff pretty difficult. This is my working area. I don't want to sit here. Let's go and sit on the armchair by the window. It's prettier. Right. Feels like ages since I've sat in this corner before. This thing's grown again. Anyway, yes, on to newsy stuff. Seeing that I've shown you my only whip for October. Okay, so admittedly, I have kept my head down for most of October and haven't really stayed abreast of most of the news, although it does seem that Etsy has been pretty busy. So I'll just talk about the things that have cropped up that I've heard of. I'm sure I'll miss things, but sometimes things crop up that I don't care about, so I don't want to talk about them. That's the good thing about having your own channel, is that you get to choose what you want to talk about and what you don't. So, but yeah, if I have forgotten anything that you think is important, drop it in the comments because people do read them and it could be useful to someone else. Okay, one of them was buyers can now buy items on Google through the add to cart on Google. I haven't looked too deeply into it because it doesn't affect me. The reason being, you need to have offsite ads switched on. And I know that there has been a bit of an uproar about that. And you all know how I feel. Actually, you don't know how I feel about offsite ads. I'm not strictly against them. I personally don't use them. That's just a personal preference. But my issue isn't so much with the offsite ads or even the fees. They're a bit steep, but you know, it's mainly the fact that Etsy are not very good at telling people about them, or even that they have automatically been opted in. That's my issue. It's all about informed consent for me, and the lack of in this case. However, when it comes to having the add to cart in Google, someone has to pay for that. And if we're not paying for it, Etsy will be paying for it. That's my understanding of this. So in my mind, it kind of makes sense to be in the offsite ad program in order to make use of this. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you will. This is the internet. People have lots of opinions and they like to express them. That's fine, as long as you do it respectfully. Otherwise, I'll just put you straight in the bin. You've been warned. But yeah, I think that's a good thing, and I think it's up to you. With regards to the offsite ad fees and stuff, as long as that's factored into your price, you should be okay. Oh, this one I thought might be useful. Again, not one that affects me, but I know that some of you make toys or clothes or other stuff for children and babies. And Etsy have launched some new resources for anyone who makes babies or children's stuff. Etsy now has to be very careful about what it allows on the platform. Again, I've seen a lot of people criticize Etsy for this, but it's not necessarily Etsy's fault. They are literally just trying to protect themselves, protect the platform, and it does trickle down to protecting sellers as well as buyers. It's a necessary pain in the arse. Royal Mail postal strikes for most of November. One day there will be a Coffee and Craft where I don't talk about postal strikes. I should point out I do actually fully support the postal strikes. Let's bring you down a little bit. And so far, they've not affected me getting stuff. In fact, if anything, I've noticed that when I buy stuff, if it's due around the time that there's a postal strike organised, I usually get the stuff earlier instead of later. It's not been too bad. I have noticed that I've not made any sales on the days of postal strikes though. Hopefully that's just coincidence. I mean, let's be honest, there's plenty of days when there's no postal strikes and I don't make sales. So yeah, I'm not going to blame that on them. Now, it should be mentioned, in November, although it looks bad, although it looks like there's postal strikes throughout the month, it's not all Royal Mail staff across board. They're staggering it so that delivery staff work certain days, and while they're working, admin and sorting office staff, I think, are striking, and then they flip. So the whole idea is that the whole process, it keeps on chugging along. I think what they're trying to do is to find that balance between making their point known, which is what a strike is all about, but also keeping things ticking over so that they're not hurting people on the ground, like small businesses. Is it going to have an impact? Yes. Will it slow things down? Possibly, yes. If you're in the UK, just communicate with your customers. I've got to say, as an aside, the days that there has been a postal strike, I've really enjoyed filming because I haven't got to have one ear open for the postman because I've got my window right here and they have to walk right past it, and it's a bit embarrassing when you're sat there talking to your camera. My postie has not only seen me talk to my camera by the window, they've caught me in the garden jumping around in front of it. What a ridiculous job I have. And news for my own shop, I have almost finished the pivot. If you have been here for any length of time, you'll know that my word for the year should have been pivot, because I have been trying to change the direction that I've taken the shop in so that I can make it a bit more future-proof, I guess. So again, for those who are new here, well, by the way, hello, my niche is hand embroidery. And up until recently, I've been selling finished things. And this year I've tilted a little bit into selling supplies, not in the way of like embroidery hoops and all of that gubbins, but things like this. If you do hand embroidery, you'll know exactly what these are. So this is just an example of what I sell in the shop. These are my winter items, and that is why I've nearly finished the pivot, because the pivot is going to end with the winter items that include kits. I don't have anything with regards to the kit to show you because I haven't got them up yet, but I'm so nearly there. I'm so nearly there, and it feels like a big deal, which is why it's newsworthy and why I'm talking about it. Which brings me to another piece of news. I'm going to start, create a website. Now, this isn't going to be something I'm going to do until the new year, which is good timing because that will also be the start of Q1, and that will be the new year as well. So I'll be full of the new and shiny feelings. Well, I mean, we can hope, unless, you know, the world wants to throw the next big thing at us. It had better not. But anyway, yes, the website. I want to start a website, and I kind of alluded to why in my last video, which really did set the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit. Etsy is no longer a handmade platform. That is what we keep on hearing. I would argue that it never was a handmade platform. It was partly a handmade platform, but it hasn't just sold handmade for almost ever. You know, there's supplies, there's vintage. Years ago, they brought in that rule where you can have a third-party manufacturer to help you make the items, which helped bring in print on demand and digital downloads. So no, it's never been a handmade platform. And I think a lot of people watch my videos and they incorrectly jump to the assumption that I think that it is, or that I think that it was, and then it needs to go back to that. No. No. Etsy has never been purely a handmade platform. It's just been a platform that has been good for handmade, amongst other things. And that has evolved into something new. And now you can sell a lot more things on the platform as well as handmade. But it's always had that handmade element. I have noticed over the years, however, that they have been turning their backs on handmade, and they've been doing this very subtly and very quietly. And one of the ways that they've been doing it was that they stopped using the word handmade in their copy and in their presentations, their podcasts. It would crop up occasionally, but it became less and less, and to the point that it almost felt purposeful. And I took a recent look at their policies, and I even found the word handcrafted. Not handmade, but handcrafted. And I thought, well, doesn't that just mean the same thing? The only time I could find any reference to handmade was when they were talking about the handmade category. And that's another point. But when people come up and they go, Etsy is not a handmade platform, it's like, I know. Don't let the squirrels in here fool you. I do pay attention. Not always, granted, but most of the time I pay attention. But you can see the confusion when one of the main categories to sell in is literally called handmade. Do you get my point? It's confusing. And until they draw the line very clearly in the sand, there's always going to be that confusion. So my attitude has always been, it's not a handmade platform. It's becoming less and less a place that is good to sell handmade on, but it is still a good tool to use. And I stand by that. I stand by that. What my point in my last video was that I used to have a long list of why I thought it was a good platform to sell handmade on. And that list is getting smaller and smaller. But this was the point that I was trying to make, why I still think it's a great place to sell on if you're selling handmade, but why I feel that now is the time to be looking elsewhere if you are established enough. Because Etsy is a great place to get started, but there does get to be a tipping point. And if you only sell on Etsy, you're setting yourself up for failure. I can speak from bitter experience to that one. So yes, my issue with Etsy, in fact, it's quite often, this is a pattern I've noticed with when I have issues with Etsy. It's rarely about the thing, whatever the thing is, like offsite ads. It's not the offsite ads that bothers me, it's the way it was rolled out and the way Etsy is very hush hush secret squirrel with it. With the whole handmade stance, it's not even that they are less and less of a handmade platform these days, so much as the confusion that surrounds that and the fact that they could very, very easily get rid of that confusion by just choosing what they stand for, committing to it and communicating that clearly. Now, I don't have an issue with the fact that they want to turn away slightly from handmade, but the fact that they want to be less of a handmade platform, but they still want to ride the coattails that come with that. Handcrafted, special, unique, can't get anywhere else items. All very well and good, all very warm and fuzzy, lovely. If you took off, I'm getting high pitched now, good God, oh no. If you took off all of the handmade items off of the site, how much of all of that would remain? I mean, you can still get an element of it, especially with the print on demand and the digital downloads, but with the amount of resellers on the site, do you really think it would be a site where you could get special, unique, can't get anywhere else items? Or do you not think it would be a little bit more like Amazon, eBay, AliExpress, etc., etc., i.e. more of what is already out there, generic tat? And that's my point. Etsy need handmade. Does it need to be a completely handmade platform? Absolutely not. And again, it never has been. But it needs to make room and it needs to be a little nicer and it needs to be a lot clearer. A lot clearer. Anyway, so I'm waffling. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not as upset as some people seem to think that I am over Etsy changing. I am annoyed at the lack of clarity around it. Not so much of a hippie, you see. There might be an element of the hippie within me, but I'm a realistic hippie. We do exist. And I think until Etsy are clearer about where they stand within everything, there's going to continue to be this debate over whether Etsy or not is a handmade platform or whether it's a good place for handmade or not, because it's as if they're saying, no, we're not handmade, but they've also got their hand tightly on handmade. So is it over for Etsy handmade? Well, it depends who you ask. Sometimes when you ask Etsy, it is. And sometimes when you ask Etsy, it isn't. And I think the problem is that Etsy has never been a handmade platform, but they are welcome on the platform. It's just another aisle in the Etsy supermarket. But sometimes the words that come from Etsy sound like they're completely not handmade. And it's just going to keep breeding confusion. I think until Etsy comes out and draws the line firmly in the sand, the answer is going to be whatever you want it to be. For me personally, Etsy is not a handmade platform, but it is a place where you can sell handmade. And I would argue at the moment that it is still the best place, the best marketplace, not necessarily the best place. And that's key. That's key, because back in the day, I used to say it's the best place, full stop. Over social media, over a website even. I don't think that anymore. That's my point. And if anybody was to ask me if I would recommend Etsy as a place to start selling handmade, I would say absolutely. Because for the reasons I mentioned in the last video, I still rate it, otherwise I would not be there. A little more clarity would be nice though.